Can we please then welcome to the Bavard Bar stage our first Bavader of the evening, Warwick Davis.
First thing is an apology. People see my name up there and expect to see the Hollywood Star Wars actor stroke game show host. It's very sad to see everybody's disappointed faces when I turn up, but sorry about that. You've got me, but I did have the name first. Thank you very much. Okay, so I expect everybody's had dealings one way or another with the NHS over their lifetimes, if not only listening to the news and hearing the state that the NHS is in. So this is really a quick run through, a compare and contrast healthcare in Victorian times to healthcare now. And I hope I'll show that it has improved, at least a little bit. So Eastbourne started off history as a tourist attraction, but really, arguably, you could say it started off as being a home for convalescents. There was a lot of convalescent hospitals or homes built in Eastbourne, attracting people down from, predominantly from London. At the time there was no TripAdvisor, so the only way people got to know how wonderful Eastbourne was for their health was getting reports in newspapers, and people were writing things like these. I'll just flick through, I'm not going to read them all out, but basically they were very appreciative of Eastbourne, saying how wonderful it was. And I think this one here, this one is a typical one of Eastbourne, where everybody's accused of coming to Eastbourne to die and forgetting why they came here. So there was loads and loads of these, and the tourist office, if there was one, must have been really pleased with them. The problem is that there was this one, which if you just have a quick read through it, is not quite so complimentary. And the snag was that it was actually last month's. So perhaps things have changed a little bit. So was Eastbourne a healthy place? Well, the medical officer was very keen every month to put out data about the death rate per 1,000. Kind of thing I suppose you want to read every month in your newspaper, but anyway they did. And Eastbourne was always very good. It always had a very low death rate per 1,000. Certainly better than Hastings and Brighton, which are obviously the two main rivals, and significantly better than the big manufacturing towns like London, particularly Manchester and Liverpool. But Eastbourne was very concerned, because of all the number of convalescents were coming down here, they were a bit worried that if they came down convalescing and then popped their clogs, it might muck up the statistics. But it didn't. The death rate stayed permanently lower than everywhere else. So obviously people were coming down convalescing and getting better. So what did people die of? Well, this was one sort of breakdown. Again, medical officers were very keen to have this in the newspapers. 207 deaths, 39 deaths under the age of 1 year. And there were certainly things like measles and whooping cough that were killers at the time. If we look at the sort of spread of death and age currently, you can see generally as you get older, you get on better terms with the Grim Reaper, which seems reasonable. If you look at the death rates back in the 1850s and 60s, you were extremely lucky if you got past 1 year old. The two graphs aren't comparable scales, but you can see the patterns. You're very lucky to get past 1 year old. You're just as lucky to get past 5. But even if you got past 5, practically every birthday, Grim Reaper was coming around with his birthday card looking at you. So what were the health issues of the time? Obviously they had all the usual ones that we have now, the cancers, the heart diseases and the rest of it. And obviously the accidents. One of the main focuses in Eastbourne, which everybody was particularly concerned about a lot of the time, was constipation. Didn't seem a particularly deadly disease, but obviously it occupied a lot of people's thoughts. But most of them, which I'll talk about just now, are the infectious diseases, deadly infectious diseases. If you cast your minds back a couple of years, we had one of these unknown contagious deadly diseases of here, commonly known as COVID. I don't know if you remember it. So what did we do about it? Well, Big Pharma got involved, and they were doing all the black stuff. They were spending millions and millions of pounds on trying to work out how to cure this unknown disease. And they were basically doing what a single white blood cell can do all on its own without any help at all. But that's another talk. All we could do were the red bits. Isolate, lockdown, wear a mask, and wash everything every time. And there was the warnings that there's no cure for this, there's no preventive measures, and it could last way after the disease has gone, so sort of long COVID. Back then, what happened when smallpox, for instance, arrived? Isolate the population. Does it seem familiar? Wear a mask, wash everything every time, and that was it. Nothing else. Again, there was no cure, no preventative measures, and there were lasting consequences for survivors. So, what about vaccination? Great, smallpox vaccinations, just the thing. But my word, there was a lot of anti-vaxxers in the room. And all those comments on there were exactly the ones that we had for COVID. And they were there in the 1870s or so, when smallpox vaccinations were coming in. Doesn't prevent the illnesses, so few people die of it, that it's not worth actually vaccinating people, save the money. It's all about government control of the population, and went on and on and on. There must be evidence that this works. Well, yeah, there's evidence it's safe and effective. And there's also evidence that it's unsafe and ineffective. So it depended on which side of the argument you wanted to be on, vaxxers or anti-vaxxers. People that have been vaccinated died. People that haven't been vaccinated died. It went on and on and on. And how did all this news get around? Right now we've got all the social media type platforms where all this information was disseminated, but back then there was really only the newspapers, loads of public meetings in the town hall, particularly in Eastbourne, and people like the Countess, I don't know how quite to pronounce her name, Niles. She married a French count, but lived in Meads. She was described as an individual who liked wearing sort of Arab type flowing gowns and sandals, and she allegedly had a room under her bedroom where she kept a cow, and there was a sort of gap in the floor where the fumes from the cow would come up, and she thought that they were health-giving fumes. She was like canoeing in rough seas, so she was definitely an individual. But she donated £1,000, quite a lot in those days, to the anti-vax campaign. Very keen against vaccinations, smallpox vaccinations. When she died, she left money to found a orphanage, girls' orphanage, and two of the things that she required was that any girls that were going to go into the orphanage had to be examined by two phrenologists, i.e. those that study the bumps in your head, to see if they were suitable, and they must never have been vaccinated for anything. So there's huge amounts of anti-vax sentiment. But obviously smallpox worked. Smallpox vaccination worked. So apart from infectious diseases, which occupied a lot of people's minds at the time, what else was there? Well, these days, if you identify a disease or an illness or whatever, there's generally a specific treatment for it. So all these specific treatments, and some of them, like chemotherapies, there's a wide range of chemotherapies, so very, very, very specific. Back then, it wasn't quite so specific. These were two of perhaps the more popular treatments. Collis Brown's chlorodyne, beware of piracy, you've got to get the right one. There was a lot of issues about quack medicine, which seemed odd, seeing as though none of the medicines worked anyway. But they were worried that there were quack medicines that were impersonating the ones that didn't work. Anyway, but Collis Brown, so it did everything. From constipation to cholera, palpitations, toothache, everything. It was marvellous, absolutely fantastic. It did everything. It was almost as good as Fraser's sulphur tablets. So it did everything from pimples to hemorrhoids, from blotches to malaria. It was particularly good if you were a delicate, disorganised and ailing woman. It didn't say why it was good for ailing, disorganised and ailing, the delicate women, and it also didn't work on men. So perhaps men weren't disorganised, or perhaps they were beyond help. The soft tablets were free. You could send off for a free sample. So I don't know how they made any money, because if you send off for a free sample, you tried it and it didn't work, why would you buy any more? But fortunately, it was free of mercury, opium and arsenic, which was a bit of a relief. You really wouldn't want an arsenic tablet, would you? The funny thing is that they're all still available on Amazon. You can still buy them. The Collis Brown ones, they've slightly changed their emphasis, and really now they only treat diarrhoea and coughs. And coughs and diarrhoea all seem to be a very unfortunate pairing, but anyway. So they're still available. But that wasn't all. There were hundreds of them. The homeopaths reckon there were 900 different drugs, medicines, treatments on the market. And they couldn't understand why people were dying with all these wonderful treatments. Of course, none of them worked. And some of them were slightly weird. Like the last one on here is a guide. It's not actually a treatment, but it's a guide to everything, absolutely everything, for worry. Treatment for late hours. What does that mean? You're late, or you want to stay up late? Diseases peculiar to women. You get the feeling that most of these things were written by men who really didn't have a clue. Old age and pimples. Well, that's a bit of a spread, isn't it? So, where would I get these things from? So, you could send off literature about these things. They'll send you recipes and information about various diseases. Or you could send off for the actual treatments, like if you wanted some sulphur tablets, you can actually send off for them. And they were always asking for numbers of stamps, which is another thing I'll be quite interested in trying to find out about, how stamps were used as currency. You could use homemade remedies, mother knows best. Well, not always, because there was a case where some lad was kicked in the leg by a farm animal, broke his leg, and his mother tried to repair it with her own recipes unknown. Eventually called the doctor, who bandaged the leg up and gave her some ointment to rub on it. He came back a few days later and discovered that the mother had been rubbing the ointment on the wrong leg, which the boy was quite pleased about because it hurt when she rubbed it on his broken leg. In the end, they gave up and got a bone setter in to set the bone. Result unknown. And of course, there were pharmacists who were quite happy to make up anything at all. If you had a recipe you wanted making up, they'd make it up, or they'd make up their own, and all completely useless. What were they made of? Mainly herbal, vegetable, or some mineral components. A lot of them were quite keen to show that they didn't have mercury or arsenic or opium or phosphorus in them, which was quite nice. Particularly arsenic, when two ladies from Liverpool were hung because they'd soaked all the arsenic off of fly paper and poisoned a man with it. Alternatively, phosphorus, because phosphorus was in matches, and people that were making the matches tended to get phossy jaw, which meant their bottom jaw was being dissolved by the phosphorus. Is it safe? What do we do? What do we take now? And is it safe? Well, all these bodies make sure that what we do take is safe, in theory. Back then, the adverts would say, well, thousands have used it, it's fine, you'll be all right. What could possibly go wrong? Trust me, and they were very careful about what they were. Medical men, rarely called doctors. So you took it very much on faith. If you didn't need to take medicine, perhaps you needed something to help you back to work. And the Royal Surgical Aid Society would provide stuff to get you back to work. It was a national thing, and there was a branch in Eastbourne, and they nearly went bankrupt because they had to provide a false eye at one stage, and they were very expensive. And they were always being told off because they were giving out too many false teeth. Allegedly, they said it was because everybody lived by the sea, and by the sea, obviously, rocked your teeth. Alternatively, it's because everybody in Eastbourne, everybody breathed through their mouths instead of through their noses. If they breathed through their noses, their teeth wouldn't rot. Right, okay. First aid, if you want to do a bit of healthcare at home. Oh, loads of suggestions. If you happen to accidentally swallow a load of carbolic acid, I'm quite sure how you come to accidentally swallow some carbolic acid, but you can swallow a lot of oil, as long as it's not lamp oil, right? Then you'll be fine. Opium poisoning, strong coffee, right, okay. Irritable chilblains. Boil some potatoes with the peel on and put them on the chilblains. Cheap, useless, but cheap. And there's all sorts. You can do anything. Rheumatism. Vinegar, cayenne pepper and table salt and rub it onto your rheumatism. Certainly make you jump around a bit. So the things actually got better. Well, there's a couple of examples of progress with healthcare. One of the big things at the time was obviously toothache, and it's quite appropriate now with people who can't get their dentist appointments. So oil of cloves and camphorated chloroform were good treatments for toothache, and they're still available, still used. The dried prunes, probably not quite so. Quite understand why dried prunes heated in an oven would actually do it. Pure carbolic soap, well here we go, this is where you might swallow your carbolic soap I suppose. And it was advised to apply it using a batch head, so you might be getting a dose of carbolic acid and phosphorus as well. You might be better just to put up with the toothache. But if you were a young lady, it was recommended that you had all your teeth taken out before you got married, to save your husband having to pay for your tooth care later on. And I've heard several people now that said yes, they've had relatives that had that. And one of them, the young lady had all her teeth taken out and false teeth put in for her birthday. I'm not quite sure how you wrap that, but make a hell of a job trying to get a cake afterwards. Mind you really wouldn't want to go to the dentist. But it has kind of improved. This character's obviously got being held back here, and it looks suspiciously like his arms are being tied down as well. So really, no, not for me, thank you. But then laughing gas came along. Actually, laughing gas is a bit of an issue these days. This is supposed to be a cartoon of when they discovered laughing gas. I'm not sure whether it's true or not, or whether they're just having a good party, but I wish I was there. It was they had a lot of fun. So, dentists has definitely improved if you can get one. Back in my other life, I was a biomedical scientist, and I was specialised in blood. So I did a lot of night shifts, but we're very interested in blood transfusions. And blood transfusions have been recognised for many, many centuries, but they very rarely worked. Mainly because nobody knew that there were actually four different types of blood. And they didn't mix. If you gave the wrong one to the wrong person, they tended to get very ill and tended to die. So what was the alternative from giving blood from people to other people? The alternative was to get it from dogs or animals. So this is slightly before Victorian times, but it's just a good example. So we have the dog here strapped up. He's being transfused into this person, and they really haven't got quite the right idea, because over here they've got another hole in the arm and it's all coming out again. So slightly pointless. But the point is, next time you're watching Casualty, and the casualty gets wheeled into A&E, and they call for 6 units of blood from the blood bank, just imagine if they were calling for 6 Alsatians to be brought up for transfusion. So right now it's a lot better, I can assure you. We don't use any dogs at all. Well, not any. Okay, so if you're a bit wary about any treatments, the best form is to prevent anything. And it was suggested that Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet and Dr. Merriman were the best preventative steps to take. And it looked as though perhaps they were the guys that were all sitting around the table after the laughing gas. Okay, so anyone prefer Victorian healthcare? Healthcare being a slightly redundant word in this case. Now, just in case Tim gets a rush of blood to the head, or he's desperate and needs somebody to do another talk, I've got another one lined up, and I'll give you a question for you to cogitate on, just in case I come back or you come back, or if you see my name you run screaming away. Person leaving Devonshire Park Theatre is knocked down by a speeding taxi, what do you do? That's not the question, I'm going to give you the answer. You do all those sort of things. Okay? So you phone up emergency services, They all turn up. If you're really lucky, you get taken away in a helicopter, you go to a major trauma centre, and everything's there for you to be looked after. Yeah? Pretty fair. 1873, somebody's leaving Devonshire Park and they're knocked down by a runaway landau and 4 horses. What do you do? That's the question. So have a think about it. If you need to know the answer, we've got a couple of books, Healthcare in Victorian Eastbourne, which gives you a bit more information about what I've been saying this evening, and also will give you the answer to the question. But otherwise, I'll leave you to think about it.
Thank you very much, Warwick.